And we're live. Welcome, everybody. Oh. Today's class is going to be an overview of how I think about academic drawing at the moment, which is going to be an evolving thing, as it is for all of you, I'm sure. And I had some mic issues. I set up a beautiful mic tripod over here, but I think the actual microphone broke on my trip to Switzerland. So it didn't work. So I'm using these right now. Can you let me know if you can hear me? This is all pretty improvised. I know there's some delay, but somebody give me a thumbs up if you can hear me, or a thumbs down if not, and if not, I'm in trouble. Also, if you're on a mobile device, you will not be able to use the chat. That's a YouTube limitation. So if you want to use the chat as well, you can watch this on YouTube, I think. There you can chat. Thank you, Guillermo. Thanks for that. But otherwise, wherever you are, if you can see this, then you're all good to go. So I live in Barcelona in Spain, and I've come to Switzerland for some family affairs, all good things. And in this house where my parents live, I have some of my works. Wait, the camera's mirrored. Some of my works. And I dug through the attic and I pulled out a few of them. And I want to start by showing some of these original works from my time in Florence. Right, microphone issue. Let's okay, let me try to unplug and see if you can still hear me. I will try to yell a little bit in the meantime. So we have, let's start with the hand. This is rumored to be Leonardo da Vinci's hand. Nobody knows for sure. And this is a charcoal drawing. There's a perfect glare right now on it from the window in front of me. This is probably the drawing that I'm most proud of in the sense of creating a sense of realism and form. When it hangs on the wall in the right lighting, it really feels like a sculpture that you can touch. So that's one. Then let's go to this one. And all of these works will not all of them, but most of them will reappear later in the presentation today. So this one is also from Florence, but a little bit later, when I was at the Russian Academy there. And I really like this way of working. It's paper on wood. Let's see. And then a slight priming of the surface. And then it's a sepia. So it's brown, well, I guess sepia color. I hope you can hear me okay. If not, also let me know in the chat. This one looks better, it doesn't have the glare from the reflection. Okay, so Russian method, constructive drawing, keep that in mind. The hand is very, it's a visual approach. Looking carefully and just studying what you see and trying to reproduce that in the drawing or painting. There's two still lifes that I have here. This one was a gift to my dad. Yeah, the lighting is not ideal, but we do what we can. Hair is overexposed as well. Wow, this one is heavy. There, I hope you can see. These are oil on panel. So canvas glued to panel. I like the rigid surface a lot more than canvas. Okay, next one. This is still life as well. This one has more varnish, so you can see the reflection is pretty strong. This one I spent about probably 2 weeks just setting up the book, composing the pages of the book, deciding where to fold it so to not create any repetition, to make it look organic, which is surprisingly much harder than it would seem. You think you just put the book there and it looks good, but many hours spent arranging and trying different ways of putting the book there to make it look nice and interesting. Also, something cool about this composition is that the front objects, foreground objects, are higher chroma, or more saturated, like apples and the string here. And then midground, less saturated. I guess the camera is not picking it up, but there's a basket in the back here. Well, there you can see it a little bit. This is the least saturated and also least contrasty element in the composition. This helps to create depth or space. You have strong colors, high value contrast, a bit less and a bit less. This one is on canvas, if you can hear. This is a portrait of a friend, fellow student, and it comes with cobwebs, apparently. It's been stored in the shed. Sorry about the reflection. So this is just charcoal on paper, being pretty rough. Yeah, this is not good with the glass, you really can't see it that well. I apologize. Two more. Let's go with this one. This is not academic. This was a work that I did after, one of my personal works. Well, it's a trip. This camera is inverted for me, so left is right and right is left. There's gold leaf around the edges, which was fun to do. And this one I did when I was working or living with Patrick Devonas. I'll speak about him more in a bit as well. And he uses this technique of painting on canvas on dye bond. So this is actually metal, and it's scratched so that the canvas will stick to the metal. So this is all glued with rabbit skin glue. It's the canvas, and then painted on the canvas. There's some things hidden. I don't know if that will be able to be seen a little bit. You can see here I've scratched in leathers and things. And the last one. You probably can't hear me much now, but I'll be back. This is a cast painting of Michelangelo's Dying Slave. And this one also works pretty well in terms of illusion of space, I feel like. And it's so fun. Like, for me, it's one of my favorite moments in the process, when the painting starts feeling like a sculpture. Like, I'm making brushstrokes, but really my mind thinks I'm sculpting. Wait, it's overexposing there. So oil on panel as well. I think it was most people were painting on canvas, but right from the beginning, I really found the hard back of wood much more pleasant to work on. I think when I bring this close, you can't see that well, but let's try. I think a common misconception is that these are like photographs. Maybe someone put it in the chat as well. These look like photographs. They are much more like nature than a photograph. If you took a photograph of this cast, as I had set it up to paint, and you put the photograph next to the painting, I think the photograph would look like a photograph and the painting would look like a sculpture. I don't know if that makes sense. Okay. Now, let me plug this in again. Transition here. Is the sound back? Looks like it is. All right. Thank you for indulging me. I thought that was fun to share since I'm here and a lot of these works are here in my parents' house. So let's go into the presentation. And I have to do things a little bit differently than usually. 3 there. So this will be awkward for a second while I change screens. There. So today's class, or session, yeah, it's a class. It's about academic drawing fundamentals. And this is what we're going to talk about. How you can use that information that I'm about to share. How I got here, you saw a little bit now with these works, but I'll give a summary of people I studied with and places I've been. Then I'll share a framework for learning art or thinking about drawing and painting, and how, like, zooming out, what is art making in our lives and what are the factors, elements that influence it. Then there will be time for questions and answers. So if you have any questions as I speak, instead of putting them in the chat in that moment, please write them down for yourself, so that when we arrive at this point here, point number 4, you can then ask me and I will actually see it, because as I'm sharing my screen now, I have one laptop that I'm doing this with and I can't see the chat while I'm presenting. So please keep them until that moment. Keep your questions until that moment. And I will wrap it up with some good habits to take along with you. Right, I had these prepared to just give a little bit of insight, but then it occurred to me that I have the originals around. So this is just for context of what academic drawing and painting is. It's this type of training that comes out of the French atelier system. And today's class is not going to be a history lesson. That's not my strength. There are people that are way more qualified and capable to do that. I'm going to speak more about how to learn, how to study, and how to think about all this stuff in a way that's useful to you, hopefully. And before we start, I want to make something clear. I should speak for myself. I have always been looking for teachers and knowledge. So that's coming in books or peers or actual teachers or experts. And I think it's important that we remember that all of us are building things, like whether that's right now this presentation or a drawing or a career or a family. And well, that's maybe a bit dark, but there you go. All these things that are so important, and we build them up like the sandcastle you see on the screen now. They will go away at some point, or you will go away. So what I'm presenting today is my perspective at the moment, and it's like an invitation for you to take on that perspective, to try it on the same way you would try on a pair of pants or maybe a pair of shoes, and you can walk around in my shoes, in a sense, and see if they fit you and if they take you to interesting or useful places. And if so, keep the shoes. You can customize them and make them your own. And if not, take them off again and walk your own path. We can make very fancy sandcastles, but even this one is gonna fade away at some point. So nothing that I'm sharing today should be taken as absolute or the truth or the way or anything like that. It's just additional information for you to see what you can do with that. So my journey started in 1985 when I was born in Austria. I grew up in Switzerland, that's me on the left there, in the countryside. That's me and the neighbor. Our wooden house that was 250 years old was between two farms. So I was surrounded by cows and horses and the smell of cow dung, which still makes me feel like home when I smell it. And then when I turned 7, we moved to a small town, which is where I am right now. And it's pretty peaceful. And I had a good childhood, I think. I tend to get sidetracked, so I'll try to stay focused. My parents separated when I was 3, and that was very difficult. Like that was the childhood trauma, I guess, that I experienced. And these are things that I'm still dealing with today. Parenthesis closed. Like all children, I was drawing, and my drawings were not really that special. I'm sure to my parents they were amazing, but they're kids' drawings, you know. When I was around 14, 15, I think, I found this movie and got really into hip-hop culture. I started breakdancing, that's me, and in the background I just saw when I put this together, there's my friend doing a little bike trick. And I started exploring hip-hop culture in the visual way as well, with graffiti. So I tried to make these letters look interesting or pleasing. And when I compared what I did to the people that inspired me, I was way behind. Like things like this. It's like existing in another dimension. I don't even understand how someone can do that. But I tried. I played with it. Around that time as well, we got our first computer at home. And there was MS Paint. And so I explored the computer as a medium for art making as well. In the beginning, literally painting pixels, individual pixels. And it was an adventure, it was an exploration, so many possibilities. Very limited tools, but your imagination is the limit for what you can create on that simple pixelated canvas. And a few months or a year or 2 later, Photoshop came out, or I found Photoshop. This here is my very first digital art piece. Well, I guess first one done in Photoshop. And this one, by the way, is not mine. I have no files from back then. So this is a file I found on Google Images, but everything else is my work or images I took. If not, I will specify. Double D, enjoy your life. Beautiful. And the way I used Photoshop in the beginning was to literally go through every menu and press every single button. And sometimes beautiful, fun, interesting, surprising things happened. So this was my second piece in the year 2001. There's a lens flare. Damn right. And I got a job to create concert posters for a youth center. I was part of organizing the concerts, and my job was to make the flyers and the posters. And through that work, I realized how limited my drawing ability was. I was learning about typography and reading books about typesetting and things like that, graphic design. And I enjoyed all of that. And I really felt that I needed to learn how to draw properly or draw better. So on the 1st of January 2004, I decided to draw every day. I committed as a New Year's resolution. Here's drawing number 1. I think 2 is up here, 3. And I posted these drawings on an online forum. Here's my mom. And again, I don't know, like these are normal drawings, I think, for someone who's drawing regularly and has been drawing for all their life. My first oil painting, you can probably tell who inspired me. And I wish I had done a cleaner circle on the moon up there. In 2005, there was a workshop organized by constructive, which back then was the epicenter for digital art, but also a lot of imaginative realism, art for games, art for films, fantasy illustration. And when I found out that they're doing this workshop, I just had to go. And it was during school time. I was in high school, and I managed to convince my teachers to let me go, to skip school for 2 weeks or whatever it was. And I think it was really a life-changing experience. It was the first time that I was surrounded by other artists, and yeah, all nerding out and drawing, carrying around their sketchbooks, having models around. It was very, very stimulating and inspiring. That's me there on the right, standing. Some of you might recognize some of these, ladies and gentlemen. And, you know, drawing was a struggle of many, many days. I fell in love with Andrew Loomis and his books, but I couldn't for the life of me figure out how he did that, how he drew these heads in perspective so they look right. It was like my brain wasn't ready to do that. But I kept going. I think being surrounded by these other people who also drew kept me going through these times where I just felt like on an eternal plateau. Like weeks at a time, no real improvement. Struggle and struggle and struggle. And then, all of a sudden, every once in a while, every couple months, I did something that I didn't think I could do. Like I surprised myself by creating something that, yeah, I was like, wow, I did that. If I can do that, I wonder what else I could do. So on the left, here's my drawing, a copy of Gottfried Bammes. The original is on the right here. He's a German anatomy teacher. Some of you might know as well. And having that spike kept me going again through months of struggle and plateauing. And I don't know if it has to be like that. I think I suffered more than necessary. But yeah, that's a different topic, I guess. And then my life changed again when I saw this picture. This is Matthew Grabelski when he was a student at Angel Academy in Florence. It just blew my mind. Like, how is that possible? That this is a painting. It looks like someone made a window and put another sculpture behind it. And when I saw this, I discovered this whole world of academic drawing and painting, of the atelier-type schools. And back then, this was 2004, 2003, something like this, there really weren't that many schools around. And I inquired to try and find the best school I could find. I really knew at that point that I had to learn how to do this. And I wanted to find the best teachers around. And when I visited Angel Academy, I really felt like I found my home. I liked the style in which they worked in, very like highly polished. For many people it's too polished. For me it was just right. It was a smaller school than Florence Academy, which is nearby. And Charles Cecil Studios was also there. I also visited. That's the best smelling art school that I've ever been to. Just smells like an art studio. But yeah, I chose Angel Academy. It felt good. That was studio back then. Over here is one of my drawings, I think. And I spent 4 years there, really deeply immersed in the study of drawing and painting. This was my first project, and with the next few images I can also explain a little bit of how this type of training works, which I don't know how many of you are, like, now this is kind of common knowledge, I feel, but it might also be because I'm in that sphere. So since this is an introduction and the fundamentals class, I will explain things from the basics. So in many of these atelier schools or academic art schools, the way you train is you begin with pencil, then you go to charcoal, and then you go to oil painting. And this process might take 3 years, 4 years. And in pencil, the first projects are usually what's called Bargue drawings. They come from a book by Charles Bargue. And out of this book, you can get these images. These drawings were designed specifically to be copied. And in the copying, the student learns how to see and how to create images from observation. We did 4 of these Bargue drawings. This was my third, and each one gets more complex. And I have a little pet peeve about this, I think. I might do a blog post at some point. Bargue drawing, you're doing it wrong. Something like this. I think the way this is usually approached is that the student is given a plate, an original, like this. And they're told, okay, copy it. I'll be back in an hour. And many of these drawings are so far beyond the skill level of the student that the students spend most of their days just waiting for the teacher to come back to give them a critique, to tell them what to do next. And I think what is a much better way is to, in the beginning, choose simpler drawings, like this one, or even simpler ones, and do a large volume of them. Copy many drawings, and especially go to the block-in stage, what's on the right here, the simple statement of the image, because that's the hard thing, to get the proportions right, all the angles, all the relationships. Once you have that, to add the shading, to add the realism and the volume is not that difficult. It just takes time. But to get here, that first milestone where you have the drawing structure established, that's the hard thing. That's the skill that once you have it, you can develop, or you can go through drawings so much faster than if you don't have it. So I think what's done wrong is that we give people drawings like this and they can't see the mistakes. It's just too much. It's too subtle. You have to build up to be able to see what is different. And I'll talk about this. I refer to it as sensitivity and control. The sensitivity to perceive what is in the drawing and what is different in your drawing, and the control of your hand to be able to reproduce the kinds of shapes, the kinds of tones, and the kinds of edges or transitions between the shapes of different tones. So for me, the purpose of these drawings is to develop sensitivity and control, and also to build a process of creating a drawing, something that you can rely on. Here's that hand again. And it's also important to emphasize that these projects take a lot of time. This drawing took 3 months to complete. And that is a luxury. Yeah, if I can zoom in here, yeah, a little bit more. You can see that there's the texture in the hand, like in the folds of the skin. And it's really, like, I think when you're not trained, this looks like photorealism. This looks like you just draw every little thing that you see, but it's really not. There are many, many decisions in this drawing of things that I slightly emphasize to create more volume, to create more harmony, and to make a more pleasing, more beautiful image. 1 second. I have my phone here so I can see what you guys can see, because I've had experiences where I'm switching to a different screen and I'm not noticing. So give me 1 second. Okay, here's that drawing set up in the studio. Over here, that is a sculpture, and this was my spot. And you're usually sharing casts between two students. And here it is framed. Still need to set this up. Okay. Sorry for that. Thank you for your patience. When you have a setup like this, where the subject, which might be a person for a portrait, it might be a model, it might be a sculpture, it might be a still life, if your subject is set up in a way that your drawing is at the same scale, this is called sight size. So when you see that term, this is what it means, that your drawing and the subject are at the same level and at the same scale. So if you're looking from the side, you would place the drawing at the same level as the head. If you place the drawing forward, well, actually, you can still make it sight size, but then the final drawing will be smaller. So, sorry, that was not necessary. I think that might have confused some of you. Usually the way you set it up is really at the same level. So you have a sculpture or a person, and you set up your canvas, not before or not in front, not in back, but at the same level. So it's parallel. This is another one that's not here. No, this is one that's in the attic, Seneca. And that also took 3 or 4 months, I believe. So if you're doing a cast drawing and you're taking a week to do it and it doesn't look like this, be patient. It will take months and months to really, really finish it, at least in charcoal. And we're talking about 3 hours per day for 5 days, sometimes 6 days a week. It's many, many hours. And I think, I'm not sure how to speak about this. But yeah, I'm doing this online teaching also to learn to be more open, to communicate. And in a way it's easier because I can't see you guys, but I know that you're out there seeing me. I know that these drawings are really good cast drawings compared to everything that's being produced. And I don't think that I have a particular talent for drawing. I think it's more that when my teacher pointed out something that I didn't see before, I was fascinated by that. It's like, wow, okay, I didn't see that before, now I can see it. So now my perception has expanded another little step. And this was the process for these drawings for me, that every day or every other day there was a new small insight for how to see more and how to create something with more subtlety. I think a gift I have is sensitivity and maybe patience, but it doesn't feel like I have to be patient. I remember students around me being like, oh, I hope today they let me pass. I hope today I can finish this project. Because the way these things work, the Bargue drawings and the cast drawings, is that your teacher will decide when you're done. It's not like you feel like, oh yeah, I think this is good enough, let's move on. It's your teacher that says, nope, not yet, fix that part and that part. And I think some students approach this with the sense of the teacher is forcing them, like giving them more work to do. Somehow, like, feels like a punishment when there's a critique of something that is missing. And I never had that. I always was curious about what else there is. And I had the luxury of time. And I'm aware of that not everyone can spend 4 years at a school like this. And it's just a passion for the discovery and for making things look beautiful. And when I teach, this is at the core of what I do, sharing that passion for the beauty that's all around us, that we can see in nature and we can find in artworks as well. Here is a bit, is there a bit of the process? No, not much, but you can see the setup and my drawing. I'll get into the process step by step a little bit later, and let's see how we're doing on time. 40 minutes in, okay. There's a lot of stuff to cover, so I will speed up a bit. Here's young me. It would be like 14 years ago, 13 years ago, I think. And I'm there sculpting the drawing, my favorite part towards the end. This one you've seen in the original behind me. Still life. Still life is the final stage of the training because you're then moving on from white objects, which are excellent to study form and surface texture and things like that, to expand into more materials, more colors, and different paint applications to suggest different materials. And composition. You know, there's composition here. It's not to underestimate, but there's much more complexity in these still lifes in terms of composition. So also, over the 2 months or so it takes to make a painting like that, probably 1 to 3 weeks are spent arranging objects and trying out different objects, seeing how they work, and then speaking with the teacher to make sure to get feedback and learn about what works and what doesn't work. And by work in composition, I think a good composition works, or a composition is good if it serves the purpose of the painting or the image, which here is to create depth, space, and a sense of harmony, and to give the viewer something to enjoy looking at. If we lead them into the painting, we want them to give something to explore. So that's why this book is so complex. It is the star of this composition. It's the center. So there has to be a lot of lovely detail to encounter there. Everything I've talked about now with these works of my studies is one half of the program. The other half is working with the figure. So every day, 3 hours is spent with the life model, the nude model. This was my 3rd drawing, I think. And I used to do these elf ears that were ignored by the teachers. That was what I got away with. And I guess that's staff top. But otherwise it's strict observation of what is in front of you and learning how to control the pencil. So I would have done this drawing at the same time as working on the Bargue drawings. So this would be my morning, or maybe even this drawing, and my afternoons would be spent with the model in a long pose. That means 4 to 5 weeks. I think the pencil ones, this is in pencil, I think these long poses actually were 3 weeks. So pencil 3 weeks, charcoal 4 weeks, and then oil 5 weeks. That's one in charcoal on white paper. And here it is in the frame. It's probably the same size as some of these. Yeah, maybe, I don't know how much you can see in this little camera, but the drawing itself here of this body would be probably as big as the frame here. So that frame is a bit taller. They're not huge, but they're also not that small, if that makes any sense. Here's another one. That was my favorite. I have a great story about this one that I will skip in the interest of time. And then moving on to painting the figure, that is the last stage. So as you get into still life painting, you also continue in the long pose with the model to move from charcoal to oil paint. This drawing is not part of my academic training, in a sense, at least not in Florence. This was done during a workshop, a summer residency arrangement. It's called the Hudson River Fellowship, which was a really, really wonderful experience. And this process I really enjoy. It is 2 brushes. This is called a wash drawing. 2 brushes. One brush is used to add pigment, and the other brush is used to take pigment away, to expose the white panel that's underneath the paint. It's a really, really lovely way of working. Very fast, very efficient, and it keeps things simple. You don't have to clean many brushes afterwards. It's nice for being outdoors like this. A thought that just popped into my mind is, as I'm going through all of this, I hope you can see that I have dedicated my life the past, let's say 2004, 16 years, 16, 17 years, I've dedicated my life to drawing and painting, to art. And I don't know what my point was. I guess to show that I've gathered information from different places. When I left Florence, I went to the US. I'll talk about that in a second. And I came back a year later when the Russian Academy in Florence just opened their doors. And I was there for 1 or 2 terms, and it was an excellent complementary education to what I've done at Angel Academy. And I'll also talk about that more. The difference between constructive drawing, which is what the Russians are really, really good at, and observational drawing, or more of an optical approach where you're looking at what's in front of you without that much understanding necessarily. So this is a drawing that I've done with Alexei, who was a teacher there, of a cast that's set up in lighting that would never have been approved at Angel Academy. It's a totally different way of lighting and of working. And Sergei Chubirko was another teacher at this academy, and I really got along with him well, and he taught me many useful things about drawing. And I guess it's always putting these presentations together with hundreds of images. As I'm going through, I'm realizing I should have put images of John Angel, who was the main teacher at Angel Academy, and Jared Woznicki, who was the head drawing instructor. And both of them taught me many things. Well, they gave me my foundational training in drawing and painting. Jared in particular has a very sharp eye. So the final super refined render that you see in the cast drawings and cast paintings, that's mostly Jared's influence of pushing just a bit more, which I really enjoyed. Here's the model of the drawing I held up before. This one, well, it's behind me. The sepia drawing. Maybe you can see a slightly different approach to drawing here. If you remember, I was also interested in computer graphics and art for games and film, so I kept training or teaching myself how to use Photoshop. I found ZBrush early on and really enjoyed that as well. And I got some freelance work, but not that much, just occasionally. Like this was a advertisement for headphones. Mostly I was working for myself, just studying. This is ZBrush as well, and I think this should play as a little turntable. So it's a digital sculpture that you can then texture. And yeah, today I think many of you will be familiar with this as a medium. Back then this was brand new. It just came out, like the first version of ZBrush. And some imaginative illustration work. So I'm starting to combine what I'm learning at the atelier school with the careful observation and bringing it to my sketches, my doodles from imagination. 2009 I graduated Angel Academy after 4 years, and I got an offer to study at a new school that was just beginning, which, as I'm saying it, seems like I was in the right moment at the right time a few times. So the art department, this is a school that's no longer around, but as I graduated, it was about to start. So I was invited to move to Austin, Texas, in the United States, to help this school set up their one of their physical locations with what I had learned in Florence. So the type of lighting, the type of plaster casts, all of that. And here I had many teachers. We worked with different companies. We worked with artists who were employees or freelancers for these studios and companies that you see on the screen now. And it got me closer to that whole entertainment art world and the beautiful, amazing, magical side of it, and the not so nice, also real side of it, maybe. And I did some assignments like this, alien defense vehicle, or some assignments to match a particular style. So this was not my work for Ghost in the Shell. It was my assignment to match the original design language, which is on the image, on the design on the right here. So I designed a non-existent sniper rifle to match the visual style. And a lot of what I learned applies here as well. It's the precise observation and aesthetic sensibility, I think, that comes from studying nature and classical artworks. I did some 3D modeling in 3D Studio Max, which I did not enjoy. I prefer ZBrush. Nowadays, Blender is so much more user-friendly than 3D Studio Max was. So yeah, I don't care about these things that much, like weapons and tanks and stuff like that, but it's interesting to explore. And in the end, it's all design, it's all visual communication, it's all trying to find beauty and interest in things. Then, wrapping up my education, my more formal education, I realized that at the atelier school, there's a lot of things that you're not learning, like how to run a studio, how to deal with galleries, how to negotiate with collectors, all these things. So I knew when I left Florence that I wanted to study and work with someone who's established, someone who has a career as a painter. And I met Chris Pugliese in New York and stayed with him for, I think, 2 or 3 months, and occasional visits here and there. And Chris works very large, and he's a wonderful composer, in my opinion. He's also not just a great painter, but also a sculptor. And it was just a lot of fun to be there in the studio with him. You can see these paintings are massive. Ted Seth Jacobs is a legendary figure, I think, in this world of academic drawing and painting. He turned 85 when I was with him for a summer. And again, I learned a new way of looking at drawing. He built this little hat for himself to not be blinded by the window light, so he can just focus on the model. And he is probably the painter that is able to pack more richness of information and more realism into a painting than anyone that I've seen so far. I'm not sure how he does it, but it's quite something to be in front of one of these images. They really, really have a presence. He's also painted his entire house, literally ceilings and floor. On the floor there's a fish pond. And yeah, a true artist and a great inspiration for me as well. And finally, Patrick Devonas. I lived with Patrick for a year in the Swiss mountains. We met on a hike and I decided to move in. And I went back home and came back a week later and stayed for a year. He's also a sculptor as well as a draftsman and painter. He works a lot from his imagination. I think there's probably no reference for this portrait here. He's building a monument in his garden for a little girl who was tortured and sentenced to death for being a witch. I think she was 13 or 14 or even 12, I'm not sure. In Switzerland. Terrible story. So he's building this monument for her. And all these rocks he has carried from the mountains in his backpack down to his garden. And this wall continues to the right here. It's quite something. He's also a fantastic composer. He paints fairly big, uses a lot of imagination, and creates powerful images for me emotionally. I mean, it's pretty intense. Not many people paint like this today. He's also the sweetest, kindest human I know. He's a beautiful person. I'm really grateful that we've met. And I've done some trips. This was me in Russia on a landscape painting trip. But, right, I put this in here because I've been wanting to go to the Repin Academy, the Imperial College of Art in St. Petersburg for a long time. And last year I finally made it there. And I got a tour. And I was drawing, because it was pouring rain outside, I was drawing the little bookstore that's in the entrance hall. And people were walking back and forth and nobody, like everyone ignored me. I wouldn't have been able to speak with them anyway, except for one person. One person made contact with this strange foreigner, and it turned out to be this guy, Mogilyevtsev, who's the author of a pretty well-known book on the fundamentals of drawing. And that was really a great surprise. And I think also a lesson of how art allows people to connect, like across country borders. People share this passion and interest, and it can bring us together. It's one of the illustrations of his book. So he teaches this constructive, sculptural, three-dimensional approach to drawing. In 2015, I got a job offer from Barcelona Academy of Art in Spain, and that's where I live at the moment. Well, I'm in Switzerland right now, traveling, but that's my home base. We have a drawing and painting program, a digital art and design program, and a sculpture program. And the digital art and design program is my baby. That's what I've spent the last 3-4 years building. And it's pretty fun. I get to combine this digital world with the traditional world. Here's some of our students doing digital cast paintings or form studies. Traditional bark drawing. Digital cast painting. This is Photoshop, and we follow the same method as I did in charcoal, but now using digital media. It's still training sensitivity and control. That's the main point of these drawings, or of these projects. Once you have that control, once you have that sensitivity, you can take it anywhere you go. You have and sharper sense. Another digital cast painting, digital still life of a pear. These are all Photoshop, I think. Some ZBrush, and some traditional sculpture. I really enjoy these. They're so fun to do. We've done a few different projects. Every term we have a different project. So we've done some books. This was for a book where every student imagined a little gnome or fairy that lives in the academy. And we made sculptures and we made illustrations and we put it all together in a book. We've done another book on different types of artists. So every student got a double-page spread and they showcase a type of artist and what they look like, how they dress, what objects they use. And it was nice to have a final product in your hands. With all this digital art, it's really nice if you have at the end something tangible, physical. And the bookbinding process here is also something that I enjoy, that's interesting. We've made a video game. That was a bit too ambitious. The students hated me at the end of the term, I think, but we all learned so much. This is the creepy room of that game, and this is the magical wizard room. We had 2 teams building an environment, creating all the assets, all the concepts, all the models. And we've done a project with Adam Paquette, who I think is here watching today. He has a lot of experience working with Magic the Gathering, so he was a visiting art director helping our students to create their own Magic card as a school project. So we're also doing some illustration, I guess you can call it, and imaginative realism. And again, the figure is a part as well. So here's a long pose done in Photoshop. These are 4 weeks. Another one. And this one was done on an iPad with Procreate. I'm not sure how Bo, the artist here, got these little black thingies. They look like eraser marks, but I'm pretty sure that this painting, this image, is done in Procreate, totally digital, which is also something fun to play with that. What is digital, what is physical, what is real. This is mine. I really enjoy that sculpting. And this is the last image of this series. Right now I'm exploring painting in a more free way, to not be that controlled. It's beautiful to have the control, but we can also be where that control can become a little bit of a straitjacket, You're becoming too precious, too serious. So I am training myself to be more free, to let the paint breathe, to experiment, to make a mess on purpose, to break things, and still explore. And that brings me to this framework that I want to share. So let's check time. We're an hour in. Excellent. So this is get mystical for a second. I think everything comes back to life force, right? We all came into this world from somewhere. We are able to move, to make sounds with our mouths, because there is something animating us. And I think all art is coming out of that too. But it's not a one-way street of things only coming out. It's a two-way street of things also informing that life force. So I've put a little system here of how I think about drawing. So we can train, we can develop these 3 things. We can develop craft, we can train and develop our body, and we can train and develop our minds. And these are the things that grow outwards like a tree. A tree grows and makes branches, makes leaves, makes fruits. It grows outwards. So in the same way, the mind, our craft, and our body grows. But then there are people that we meet, there are teachers and friends and family members that give us information. They inform us. Our experiences in nature informs us. It's coming in, so that then when you make art, that art comes out again. And artwork up here, or creations of other people, also inform us. They inspire us. They give us new ideas for shapes, for colors, for arrangements. So we have here both a radiative dynamic and a gravitational dynamic. And again, this, when you put it like this with geometry, it looks so absolute. And I enjoy that in a way. Like, it looks so clean and clear. But remember the sandcastle. This is my sandcastle. And I made it look really ornate and nice. But it's just an idea. It's just a perspective for you to try on. So don't take it too seriously. So there's a lot of stuff in each of these dimensions, you can say. And today we'll focus on craft. But I want to explore each of them just quickly to see what is one level deeper. If we zoom into one of them, what is there? So in craft, I see this development of sensitivity and control. And that's true in any craft, whether you're learning music or martial arts or drawing, it doesn't matter. You need sensitivity to perceive what's going on, and you need control of the medium of your hand, of your whatever is involved in that craft to express yourself. There's also processes and techniques in music, in dance, in art, things you can learn, steps you can follow that will lead to certain results. And as you apply those methods and steps and processes, there are principles that exist that we can't get away from. Universal, I don't want to call them truths, I want to call them principles. Like, if you do that, then this will happen. And elements I put there together with principles, and the elements will be the building blocks. So in drawing, it might be line or tone or shape. These are elements of the craft. In music, it might be pitch or rhythm, things like that. So then we go to mind. When we zoom into mind, what is there that we can develop? You can slice this in many different ways, but for me, the most interesting or useful way to look at it is that there is resilience we can develop, how to deal with difficult times, with obstacles, with frustration. We can develop our ability to learn. We can become more aware of how we learn best. We can become more aware of how different people teach and what is a good match for that. There's a skill of introspection or self-awareness that is critical. Without it, you will not grow much in any area of life, I think. And then the area of peak performance. You could also say flow state. Like, when are you at your best? When does time disappear? When does creativity flow out of you? What can you do to get into that state? What circumstances do you need? Or how can you train yourself to not need those particular circumstances, but to become self-sufficient and thrive in any type of environment? Those are all things in the domain of the mind. Then in body, I think of the body as having the dimensions of energy, and that contains your sleep or rest, recovery, what you eat, how often you eat, with what state of mind you eat. All these things affect how the energy flows through your body. There's posture, there's a link there as well. When you're really exhausted or really tired or really sad, your posture will show it. And I think it goes both ways. The emotion or the energy level can drive the posture, or the posture can also affect the energy level. If you make an effort to sit upright, you will feel more present, more awake than if you purposely slump over and breathe in a shallow way. These are all things that you can become aware of if you choose or if you come across the information. Then there's strength, mobility, and movement patterns. I think strength and mobility are pretty self-explanatory. Movement patterns are the way you use your body. In dance, how do you move? Or in, let's say, tennis, how do you serve the ball? And in painting and drawing, it's the same way. What are your movement patterns as you draw? Can you refine them? Can you expand your repertoire? How do you relate to that dimension or that aspect of your body? All right, let's take a look at the gravitational aspects, or what is informing us. People, there are teachers, peers. Peers can also be teachers. Often in school, the best teachers are our peers. There's your family, your friends, and the whole cultural context that you are in. All these connections with people will have an effect on you as a person and on your artwork as well. And maybe you're hanging out with the same people all the time, so you're not getting many new ideas through that channel. So you could make an effort to meet new people, go to places where you're uncomfortable, and that will stimulate your creativity. For example, artwork, I could also call this work, or people's creations, or artifacts maybe. I think this is where a lot of inspiration comes from for many people. Ideas, stories come out of books, for example, or songs. And the cultural context or historical context, both that you are in at the moment and that the artwork that you're looking at was in when it was created. So when Picasso painted Guernica, what was the cultural context he was in when he made that painting? And when we look at it today, how has that context changed? I think that's also really important in this domain of artwork. And nature is, I don't know what to put next to it, so I put this kind of bowl, like it's holding everything. Nature is what we exist in. It's the substrate of our experience. And next to, or close to where I live in Barcelona, there's a path that goes up the mountain, and there's written on the floor in probably about 9 different languages a quote from Gaudí, the architect, Catalan architect, and it says, "Everything comes out of the great book of nature." And I think that is true. All right, so we have so many things here, and we have only less than 1 hour left. So I thought we would focus today on the first 2 parts here, inside of craft, sensitivity and control, and process and techniques. Everything else might be in a future course or something that I'm building. I put this all together in the last few days. So it's a seed of something that might grow, or maybe I'll move on to other things. But let me know what you think. If you want to see more of like exploring mind or body, for example, I'd be curious to hear where your interests are. 1 sip of water. And let me check for a second the chat just to make sure I am all right. Okay, doesn't look like any complaints. So let's get back. I hope you are still energized. Maybe move for a second. Take a deep breath to be ready for taking in a lot of information. I'm not sure if I can make it in the next 45 minutes, but let's try. And if not, there's a recording, so you can always go back and explore this again. So let's dive into sensitivity and control inside of craft. For me, the most important three elements here are edges, or also called transitions, shapes, which refer to proportions, and tonal values, which refers to how bright or dark something is. In drawing, in the craft of drawing, if you have sensitivity and control in these three dimensions, you are good to go in many aspects. So let's take a look at these three. Shapes are anything you can draw a boundary around. So in this case, that is a shadow shape in there. You can also think of a negative shape between the legs here. And shape refers to proportions in the general sense, like how wide is this drawing compared to how tall it is? How big is the head compared to the torso? How big are the hands compared to the feet? All these things are in this area of shape. And you can train yourself to be able to perceive shapes much more precisely. At the beginning, when I was doing bark drawings, people told me that, oh, this is a millimeter off or 2 millimeters off. And I thought, who cares about a millimeter? Like, how can you even see that? Nobody can see that. But after a while of practice, 1 millimeter becomes a big distance. You can actually work with half millimeters or a quarter of a millimeter. You will become that sensitive. Values is the lightness or brightness and darkness. So that shadow shape we looked at has a value of 3 on a 10-step scale. Whereas the white paper or this side of the block has a value 9. It's not pure white, there's some tone here, so 1 step down. And that's another thing you can develop sensitivity and control for. And then lastly, edges or transitions are whenever two shapes meet, they can meet in a hard, sudden way, like on the leg here, or in a more soft way, like down here. This is a form that's rolling, that's turning around, so the tones are flowing into each other in a soft way. And then if you have hard on one extreme, on the other extreme is a lost edge. So when you cannot find anymore where one tone starts and the other one stops. That's a continuous gradient or a lost edge. So there's hard, lost, and then soft in the middle. And any edge, any transition you find anywhere in this drawing, you can place on that range from hard to lost. And that's it. Shapes, values, and edges. Let's go to process and techniques. And this is the meat of today's class. Inside of process and techniques, I divide it like this. There's media techniques, how to use pencil or charcoal. There are processes for how to build a drawing, how to go step by step and have a method so you're not getting lost. And finally, good habits. Things you can do that will make your life easier, that are just smart things to do. If you, let's see, this is tricky territory. If you see yourself as creating something that you have a vision for, these habits are very helpful, I think. Like everything else, the opposite of something is also important. So sometimes it's important to break those habits. But I hope you'll see what I mean towards the end here. Let's begin with media technique. Starting with pencil. This is the basic set of tools that I use. And I explained this on my live stream this week, I think. So I apologize if it's repetitive, but I do everything, almost everything in pencil with two pencils, a 2B and a 2H. Because with those two I can cover most of the spectrum from pretty dark to very, very light. And actually probably 80% of my drawing time will be spent with a 2B, which I think this would be the one. That's a 2H here. So a pretty soft pencil and a very sharp pencil. No, pretty soft pencil and a pretty hard pencil. They should both be sharp if I need a lot of control. But early on in the process, it can also be a regular pencil like this with a writing point. The sharp point is only important if you're working on small detail. Then they have this eraser stick, which is really useful for making precise erasing marks. The kneadable eraser, which is very useful because you can change the shape of it. A sharpening pad, and I'll show a few different pads in a moment, and a knife. And yes, you can use mechanical pencils that just have a lead inside, but I prefer the wood for mostly the smell of it. I think it's a nostalgic thing that I really, really enjoy. Smelling the wood. They also feel better in my hand. I like the feel of wood compared to plastic of a mechanical pencil. A small thing I could mention here too is the extender. If you want to use your pencils until they're really tiny stumps, you can't really draw that well with a super short pencil, but you can stick them into one of these extenders and use them for another while, so you get your money's worth. These blending stumps I would stay away from at the beginning of your drawing career, because they are an additional complication, or they make the process more complex. I would encourage to experiment with them and play with them, but for your serious drawings, try to do it without the stump, because it will train you to be have more control with the pencil. Another super useful tool is the maul stick. And sorry, I will follow my internal dialogue here. I have changed my position a bit on the blending stumps, and there's a lot of controversy around this tool in the academies. Mostly it's very strong opposition against using this tool. And I think it is a good perspective for the beginner, because drawing is already complex and hard enough. So if you're adding another tool, you're making it even more complex. So in that sense, I agree with the opinion of many of my colleagues to not allow the blending stump for academic training. At the same time, I am all about exploration and empowerment of the creator, of the individual. So you should try everything. So I'm not quite sure where I stand. I want to encourage you to explore and play. And I guess I'm cautioning you to, if you're using this, you're making your process more complex. So, maul stick, the purpose of that is to keep your hand from touching the paper and smudging your drawing. Simple as that. You can buy them like this. You can connect them or disconnect them for easy transport, or you can just use a piece of wood. Another tool that's very common in these atelier-type schools is the plumb line. And again, this can be any string. It's better if it's not stretchy. So some fishing strings or nylon strings are pretty good, because you can use the plumb line for measurements as well as finding alignments. So alignments would be things like this that are at the same level vertically or also horizontally. So you can hold up your plumb line. I don't have one. You can use that. Right? And hold it up against your model and see what lines up. But you can also hold it like this to measure. especially if you're working side size. You can measure on your drawing and compare it against your subject. There's a lot to say about measuring. I don't want to get into that really right now, but I would say the one thing I want you to remember about measuring is that when you measure, you should make an estimation by eye first. So do not measure and transfer the measurement on your drawing and make a little tick mark of where the measurement falls and then continue with your drawing, like as a way to find stuff. You're not going to develop sensitivity and control over shape that way. Instead, make a mark, like find the distance on your drawing, then look at it and compare it to your subject. Is the nose the same height as your model? If not, fix it. You can see it's off, so fix it to the best of your ability. Correct it, check it again. Still not right? Correct it again. As long as you can see that something's wrong, correct it with your eye. Then, at the end, to double check, then you can measure. But remember that any type of measurement you do with like your arms, there will be always a margin for error. You will think you're more precise than you actually are. So your eye is going to be more precise than your measuring tools. And that's what you want to train. You want to train your eye to be precise. Next atelier tool is the mirror. And a lot of people use little pocket mirrors, makeup mirrors, and you hold them either like this, so you're looking at the subject here and it's flush with your face. You can hold them like this, again looking at your subject and your drawing in the mirror, flush with your nose, or you can hold them like that and looking at the subject and your artwork in the mirror like this. And I'm using a phone because I don't have a mirror here, but also you can actually use a phone because there's, besides the regular mirror, what is also used is a black mirror. And this was around before the TV show. But what the black mirror does is it compresses the value ranges. So it becomes easier to see what is light and what is shadow. You can buy black mirrors as tiles for bathrooms sometimes. Yeah, I'm not sure where to get them. But you can look for black ceramic tile or black mirror or black glass. Or if you don't have one, a phone that's turned off will serve as a black mirror. This one, that picture I chose, looks like it has a screen protector. So that might make the image more blurry and therefore maybe less useful. So I guess a naked phone screen is best. Then the topic of sharpening. How do you get these ninja pencils that you see in atelier schools? You first take off the wood with the knife and then sharpen. And I see recently a lot of people using these blocks. And I would strongly advise against these blocks because this. You will waste a lot of time washing your hands, or you will actually damage your artwork because you have dirty fingers and you touched your drawing. So what I prefer instead of the block is something like this, a sandpaper pad. That's pretty good. They will last you a while. You can remove the sheets here. There's a couple layered. What I found even better than this, but a bit more difficult to find, is this model, which has only one layer. There's a smoother sandpaper and a rougher sandpaper. And this has lasted me, I don't know, probably 8 years now. I haven't had to replace it. It's still sharpening just fine. It has a little pad here to wipe off the pencil, which is also very useful, that this doesn't have. So when you're done sharpening with this pad, you'll have all the graphite stuck to the tip of the pencil. And if you touch that with your finger by accident, or maybe even as you place your pencil on the paper, the charcoal or the graphite dust will fall on the drawing. It's all not good. So if I don't have a little wiping pad like this, I'll usually take a paper towel or a rag and physically clean the tip before drawing and right after sharpening. The white thing here is a small envelope that I made so I can slide that pad in here, store that with my little box of tools, and nothing gets dirty at all. I'm lazy, I don't want to clean my pencils and hands, and that's an easy fix. Now, moving on from pencil to charcoal, Nitram has been the most popular brand for atelier-type schools. I'm sure there are some alternatives, but I haven't really come across them. These charcoals are expensive, and we sharpen them like this, which means you lose quite a lot of material. So what I would recommend you do if you're using Nitram like this is to save the shavings, because you can actually do an initial drawing with a brush with charcoal powder, or you can use it in other ways in your work instead of throwing it all in your trash can. Now, you cannot use a sharpening pad like this really efficiently to sharpen charcoal sticks like this. The pad is too small, so you need something bigger. Nitram makes a sharpening pad like that. If you have the money, go for it. That's one thing less to think about. I would not recommend something like this, as I said. If you are budget conscious, then you can make your own. This one, I bought a kitchen cutting board and just glued sharpening or a sandpaper on it, which also means you can choose exactly the tooth that you want, or you can do two different teeth, I guess would be the right word, for the two halves of it. I would not recommend putting sandpaper on both sides of the pad. Like now it's on the top. I wouldn't put another bit on the bottom, because if you sharpen on both sides, then whenever you put it down, you guessed it, charcoal mess everywhere, which is more time spent cleaning and less time spent drawing. And this is the last solution. If you only have wood and not a cutting board like this that's already prepared, you can have that. Like I ordered that piece of wood from a carpenter, but if you have a saw, you can make it on your own very easily. And then again, I glued sandpaper on it. There's a step-by-step tutorial for this on my website. If you go to dorianeiten.com/sharpening pad, I'll walk you through how to make one of these. Again, like pencil, there are little holders where you can stick your little, what's the word in English? I don't know. In German it would be Stummel, your charcoal Stummel. Stick it in the extender and you can use it for another day or two, or more, depends on how much you're drawing. Use your materials. Then in charcoal, you can use brushes quite nicely. This is a bit related to the blending stump conversation. Some people are totally against using brushes in charcoal, and it's a similar argument. It is just simpler if you only have paper, charcoal, eraser. That's it. You can do everything you need with those tools. For me, I like a brush because I like the painterly feel. And the danger is that you make your drawing too round. Like it loses the structure, it loses the strength. Everything becomes sausagey. But if you're aware of that, you can guard against it and maintain the structure as you draw. Then you can make your custom tools. This is a makeup pad, I'm not sure what it's called, stuck into a mechanical pencil because it works, and that's what I had available. And a little sponge tip for softening things in charcoal. It's also very satisfying to make your own tools, I think. And then a kitchen sponge, which at Angel Academy in Florence, we used for the backgrounds. We'd actually work the charcoal into the paper and then make it smoother with the brush, with the sponge. Sponge and brush, actually. And the chamois or chamois leather cloth, which is also very nice to soften things and lighten tones sometimes in charcoal. This is a bit too early in the sense of that we haven't talked about the stages, but on this image right now you could see where in time in the process I would use which tool. So at the start, when there's big areas of flat tone, I use the kitchen sponge, the big brush, the stomp, the brush, or small brush, the cloth. And then as we get more and more detailed, I will go to smaller, more subtle tools. And the very sharp charcoal is also used more in the end, whereas in the beginning your charcoal can be actually completely blunt if you're just laying in tone, or just less sharp than what you need at the end. The sharpening pads, the maul stick, and the eraser creature we will use throughout the process, of course. All right. So we move on from media and technique to step-by-step process. And the time is 20 minutes left. Okay, let's see. I'll take another sip of water. And I hope you are enjoying this information and that it helps you in your art making. Before or as we get into processes, I want to address this point that I've alluded to throughout my talk so far, that there are two ways to think when you're drawing. One way is more visual, where you're looking at the subject and you're looking at your drawing and you're just visually comparing. And if you're doing that really well, you'll end up with a drawing that looks dimensional, that looks real, that will have dimensionality, even though you were just thinking of flat shapes. So that's a shape-focused approach. And then there's also a form-focused approach. That's more the constructive anatomy, where you're thinking like a sculptor, building actual form with your mind on the flat page. So this here is shape, flat, 2D. And this here is sculptural, form, thinking 3D. And these are both skills that you can develop. You can be highly skilled in thinking about form as you draw, and you can be highly skilled in visual accuracy. Most schools tend to emphasize one or the other, but I think the sweet spot is the fusion of both. So you get drawings like this, where there is proportional accuracy and precision, but there's also things that the artist is saying in terms of form. I know that Paul Baudry is understanding the deltoid being in front of the biceps, the triceps. It shows understanding. The artist is communicating. He has his brain switched on as he is creating these forms. It's not just mindless copying. And that gives you some space for expression, I think. You're not a slave of the reference also in this way. This is Rubens and Jeffrey Mims. So these drawings for me are a beautiful combination of form thinking and visual optical sensitivity and accuracy. And Sergey, whom we've met before, this will be more emphasizing the form, but it still has accurate shape and proportion. So let's get more deeply. We're still in process. I just bring this slide again to show you, to orient yourself. And maybe what all of these slides are like the map of how I see, how I think about drawing. So right now we're at this stop of the map, in this territory of steps and processes. So this also I spoke about on the live stream recently, but I'll go through it again because it's really the foundation for all of this academic drawing. If you've been somewhere else on Facebook or somewhere, come back to the video because this will be useful, I think. We begin a drawing like this with the placement stage. So I mark top, bottom, left, right. 4 marks that show me the proportions, height to width, but also the placement on my page. So with those 4 marks, I can move the drawing up or down or left or right very quickly. I can change the proportion by just moving one line. The better your placement stage is, the smoother the rest of your drawing will go. And this is a fundamental principle, an overarching mental guideline with all of these works, is to work big to small and to do every step well. If you rush the placement stage, you will probably pay for it in a later stage because there will be a mistake. It's not possible to get every stage perfect. It's not desirable in a way because that will slow you down way too much. So you have to find your balance of what is close enough. But if you work with this attitude of going from big to small and of doing every stage well, your drawing will probably come out pretty much the way you wanted it to. So placement stage, and then the next one is big shapes. So we take all of that complexity on the subject on the right, and we try to condense it, to explain it in as few lines as we can. Not too few, because then it will just be a line salad, but nothing should be in the big shapes. Nothing should be in the big shapes stage. There we go. That isn't really needed. So every single line you add, you have to think about, is that line actually important? Is that line useful? And for me, that is the craft of drawing. If you are so present with the process that you are thinking about, okay, that thing over there is not really important, let's leave it out, let's leave it for later. That thing there, let's say the line of the level of the eyebrows, that is going to be very useful to have in my drawing. It's a big shape kind of thing. So I'm going to put it in there now early on. Then, working big to small, maybe you can guess what the next stage is. It's medium shapes. So we break the big statement down into medium level of accuracy. We add more information. With that, we can see more easily what is not working properly. You can spot your mistakes more easily if you add more information, more lines, but that comes at a price. The price is that it will take you longer to correct the mistakes that you can now see. So again, be conservative with how much you add. Adding less is usually better, and assess your drawing in a more simple stage and fix everything that you can early on. From medium shapes, we go to the no-tan stage. This means we fill in the shadow shapes. And there's an important distinction to make between shadows and halftones, which we probably won't have time to get into deeply. But these tones on the cheek, over here, maybe up here on the hair, these are not shadows. They're still in areas of the surface that receives direct light. These tones over here are shadows. The light actually is not reaching in these parts of the subject. So those true shadows, we are toning in with one flat tone everywhere. Keep things simple, so one tone and the same tone for your lines. That's the no-tan stage. As soon as you do that, as soon as you put in a tone, you will again see your mistakes much more easily. You've added more information, you get an exchange, seeing mistakes more easily, but you pay more time needed to fix those mistakes. Then the articulation stage is where we refine proportions. Really, now you have light shapes and shadow shapes, you have all the major elements placed. With that, you should really be able to make the proportions very accurate. And that stage can take a while, that's why it's a separate stage. Articulating, like articulating speech, means from a drawing that's kind of general to make it really specific. My example here is a fairly rough articulation stage. I think it would have been good to have a bit more information, but the point here is to specify, correct, to true it up. Then we go from considerations of proportion and flat aspects of the drawing, and we switch to the three-dimensional understanding. So we add what is called big form modeling, understanding the head as an egg shape, the neck as a cylinder. So I give the volume to those big forms, and I ignore on purpose, and that is hard and takes discipline, I ignore the smaller forms, like what's going on around the face, in the cheek, the chin, the lips, the eyes. None of that should be added at the big form modeling stage. The big form has to look three-dimensional before we go to the medium forms. Again, working big to small. And here we have the medium form modeling. You can see on the lower left. That's getting a bit more specific. Still not super specific, still not small forms, but one step smaller from the big forms. Again, adding more information. And then final stage is adding all the small forms, all the details, all the little subtleties of eyelashes, and finishing the drawing. So at the end you have something that should look exactly like the thing you studied, and you have gained in the process sensitivity and control, and a process that now you can use for other things. Here is that process laid out in phases. So there's the linear block-in phase, placement, big shapes, medium shapes, there's just lines. Then the notan phase, and I should explain, notan I think is a concept from Japanese wood printing. So there are two tones. That's where the word comes from. I got it from Ron Lemon. He's a wonderful teacher as well. And that stuck with me. That word was not used in Florence, as far as I know. It still isn't today, but I like it because it makes that stage stand out as its own thing. I think it's really an important stage once we go from lines only to filling in the shadow shapes. So notan, articulation with that shadow in there, and then moving on to the modeling or rendering phase. Big forms, medium forms, small forms, or finishing. And that's it. You can draw anything you want in that process. We'll look at a few different projects now, and you will hopefully recognize that process. There are some variations, but fundamentally it's this. Big to small, do every stage well, build a drawing with a method. I wanted to do a little draw along, but I think we don't have time, so I might do it in a live stream on Mondays. So this here is the program at Barcelona Academy of Art in the digital art and design curriculum. 1 second while Photoshop boots up here. I need to zoom in. We begin with 2 assignments that build a fundamental sensitivity and control. So we make a value gradient, which is a continuous scale. Sorry, I shouldn't say scale. It's a continuous gradient, there's no better word, from black to white, or from fully dark pencil to the white of the paper. That's a smooth gradient. And then we also do a scale, which has 9 steps. And here is the process of that project. So starting with just the swatches, then black, then going in the middle, going in the middle again, and then middle again, and then filling in the remaining middles and balancing out each tone as you go. So you get a continuous scale, like a ladder, of different tones. 9 steps is very useful because that gives you a step number 5 in the middle, which is exactly between the darkest dark you can get with your medium and white. By the way, if you're switching from pencil to charcoal, I recommend that you do a scale like this and the gradient like that in charcoal. When you start painting in oil, do one in oil. This is like your first contact with the medium. And if you can't do a scale well, you'll have a lot of difficulty making a drawing. You're developing sensitivity and control not just for tone here, but also for edges. Making a lost edge through here and making a sharp edge around. And here making sharp edges between each value step. It's not that easy. If you haven't done it, I challenge you and I encourage you to do a value scale. So here's the process we just looked at with the Bargue drawing. And then we do a project that's called geoform block-ins. And here we just arrive at the no-tan stage. So we're practicing placement, big shapes, and then go to no-tan. Because that's the difficult part, to arrive here. So we do many of these block-ins. And that's something that I would recommend to any of you who want to train that skill of capturing an image and building the foundation so that then you can render and finish it on top. It's like doing push-ups or playing scales with music. Here, taking it one step further, is the cast block-in. So again, placement, big shapes, medium shapes, no-tan, and then we go to value grouping. So with 3 or maybe 4 values, we show the whole subject. And you're starting to balance value relationships. This goes beyond the scope of today's lesson, but I hope you can see here that we have gone one step further than with the geoform block-ins. Next, we go one step further still into a full cast painting. So the steps leading up to it are all the same. Placement, big shapes, main transitions of the big shapes. So this is a no-tan block-in. I've combined the block-in with the no-tan. We're putting in tone a bit earlier because by now our drawing ability is stronger, so we can compress steps. Not skip steps, but make the process more condensed, more efficient. Then value grouping. And once the value groups are well balanced, we go to modeling or rendering. So big forms, medium forms, and finishing. Same thing. Down here, this is kind of also beyond what we're talking about today because it's getting into color and painting, but it's the next assignment here, which is to paint a pear 3 times. Once from observation in 6 hours, then alla prima in 1 session of 3 hours, and then again the day after from memory. Okay, that is the curriculum. At the end here, there are also 2 still life projects and then the final project, which are not shown here. Repetition is the mother of learning, or something like that. So let's go it again with a charcoal drawing this time. And there's a slight variation in that we make a cartoon. A cartoon is a drawing on regular paper that then is transferred on the high quality paper so that the paper is pristine. So here I'm starting the cartoon. This is a figure drawing. That's the finished cartoon. So regular, cheap drawing paper. Then on top of that, I place a transparent paper, a tracing paper. The Spanish word comes to mind, which is papel vegetal, vegetable paper, transparent paper, and I'm tracing all the lines with a red pen. Why red? You'll see in a moment. So there's the transparent paper on top with all the lines traced in red. Then I flip that transparent paper over, right? I slip my nice, expensive, high-quality drawing paper in there on top of my old paper, so I also get some padding. And I flip back, well, not yet, right? I leave this open, so we have the back of the transparent paper here, and I will trace the red lines with charcoal. Here we go. So it's still open. I'm tracing all the lines now with charcoal, so that when I flap it back, I can transfer those charcoal lines. And you can see the utility of the red pen, because now I can see where I have been and where I haven't been yet. And as I flip that back, now it's flipped over again, I will go with a black pen. And again, you can see the utility of a red pen, because now I can see where I have been and where I still need to go. All the red lines with charcoal underneath have to be passed over with a black pen that will press the lines into the or onto the new paper. That's what's called a transfer from a cartoon. And I end up with my drawing transferred on my new sheet of paper. I can take off the transparent paper, and here we go. So now the actual drawing in charcoal starts. The cartoon was done in pencil, which is much faster and cleaner to work with. Now charcoal comes in, and we do a value lay-in, in a way, like value groups. Same thing as you saw on the cast before. 3 groups here, the white of the paper, the middle tone, which is the same in the background as it is on the shadows of the figure. So staying very disciplined there to use 3 values only. And then the darkest tone, which is also in the hair. I guess the top of the box is a lighter gray, so we have 4 values total, which is still okay. I think 4 and a max of 5. Then, can you guess what comes next? Now we've done the placement stage, big shapes, medium shapes, notan, value, study, value groups. Now, what is next? We go from flat to volume, so big form modeling. Then medium form modeling, and then small form modeling or finishing. And that is the finished drawing there. And let's do the same again for this cast drawing. Starting with the cartoon in pencil, filling in the shadows to see, like now we have a notan stage, we can see proportions better. It's still on the cartoon. Here you see the cartoon next to the cast, set up in side size. Here I added a darker background because there's so much contrast in that particular setup between the black background and the shadows of the figure or the cast. So I have 3 values again: white of the paper, shadow of the cast, which is the same as the wood, and then the dark background. And I spent probably 2 weeks or so, maybe even 3 weeks, just on getting this cartoon to be very accurate. Then we transfer, again with the red lines, transparent paper here. Put charcoal in the back, put the new sheet of paper underneath, slap the transparent paper back, transfer the charcoal lines. You can see them here. and I have my pristine piece of paper with the lines transferred on them. And now we switch from pencil to charcoal. And this is a peculiar thing of Angel Academy, this process. We don't do this at Barcelona Academy. And I personally like this process. And here's how it works. So I've put in the background. In this case, I used compressed charcoal, which goes a bit darker than vine charcoal, but is slightly greasy, so you can't really erase it. That is why your proportions have to be spot on. I cannot move that edge now, because the background is filled in with a material that cannot be erased. So once that background is in, I use the soft B charcoal, nitram, and just use a new stick, no sharpening, and just grind it in, like lay it in, full black, like that. Then, this is the special step. We use a brush and sometimes a blending stump to really grind the charcoal into the paper. Because if you don't do that, even if you press the soft charcoal and just go fully black, you can put your finger in there and it will lift off and go like to a value 5, to that mid-tone gray. That's not so good for the durability of the painting, or drawing rather, and for your experience of drawing. Because sometimes you want to lighten things in the shadows just a little bit. And if you just put charcoal down and then erase, it will come off way too much. So now I'm with the blending stump grinding the charcoal into the paper, and then with the brush also grinding into the paper to really make the charcoal stick. This will lighten the tone, so we do 2 passes of that. Here I'm pretty sure that's my second pass because it's quite dark now, and actually this is the lightest I'm able to get by really working hard with the brush and the paper stump. It's not going to get lighter than this, and that's a good thing. Now if I go with my finger, it doesn't lift out almost at all, and if I use an eraser, I can lighten, but it's having a much softer, much more subtle effect. So I can bring out my reflected lights gradually in a controlled way. So let's see. This looks more like, no, maybe this is after the second round. It might be after the first round because it's still a bit light. But you can see that I've done this process of working the charcoal into the paper on this value group, the shadows and also the wood down here. Then, what comes next? We have the value groups established. We're still flat. Now we go big form modeling. No details, nothing in the nose, nothing in the forehead, nothing in the hair. It's hard and it's very useful to learn to restrain yourself and just show the big form, because it forces you to have that sculptural conception that this is an egg. So big form modeling, then we go to medium forms, starting to get some more detail in the hair, around the eyes and the forehead. Starting to get that wood texture as well. It was very time consuming but enjoyable. And then from medium form modeling to finishing and small forms. And that last step from big forms to finish, I'm not exaggerating. I think when I say it takes 60% of the drawing time, like I might have gotten here in, now I'm going to show my math weakness. I might have gotten here in a month, and I'll spend 2 months getting from here to here. Getting that finish is so time consuming, but also for me it's the most enjoyable part. So it all works out for me. I get to spend the most amount of time with the thing that I really enjoy. And that's the final framed. And let's see the time. Oh wow, we've reached 2 hours. Well, I think we will go it depends on how many questions there are. I'll go through the figure process in maybe 5 or 10 minutes and then open up for questions. And let's see how many questions there are. I'll spend at least 5 minutes and maybe up to 10 minutes on questions. So we're looking at maybe 20 minutes more. I hope that is doable. And if not, this will be recorded so you can go back to that. I'd rather make it round and complete than like stop or leave something out now. So with the figure, this is a step-by-step demonstration from Barcelona Academy of Art, done by Costas Protopapas. I might have got his last name wrong. You, like many of you, will know Costas. And Gerard Millet, who was a graduate of Barcelona Academy as well. And I've worked with both of them as students, and they are doing great work, and I'm grateful that they put this step-by-step together. So with the figure, it's a bit more specific on what you're drawing, because every time you draw the figure, there will be shoulders and knees and elbows. So we create our process based on those anatomical features. I can't zoom in too much more without cutting this off, but let's do it like this. Step 1, again, placement. Find top, bottom, left, and right. And with the figure, it's very useful to have a center point, halfway point in the middle. And I think not just the figure, but anything that's very tall or very wide, if you find the middle, that will be a huge help for placing other things in your image. So the figure, I always do it center point as well. And on the model, on the human body, that's the pubic symphysis, which is a useful anatomical landmark around here on the pubic bone. So we have the placement working, then we do what I call a construct. And this is also Angel Academy terminology. You can call it a block-in, but I call it a construct because you're constructing the figure with these particular anatomical landmarks. So there are the hips, shoulders, nipples, and knees. Why those? Because those anatomical landmarks divide the body into quarters. On the ideal human figure and on everybody else, roughly in quarters. It's close enough to be very useful. So from the head to the shoulder, 1/4. From the shoulder, let's go here to the pubic symphysis, 1/4. And this is a symphysis is here, sorry. So this person has a, no, I'm getting it wrong. It's to the nipples, sorry. I haven't reviewed this process in a while. So top of the head to nipples. From here to the center of the body is roughly divided in halfway. So you go top of the figure to the center of the body, and then dividing that in half gets you to the nipples, roughly. Sorry about that, I got lost for a second. I hope that makes sense, and I hope you can see that on the model. If this is your upper half, then the nipples, are roughly half of that. Here I guess there's a lot of hair, so that brings the top half a bit taller. The bottom half, we can do the same thing with the knees. So we have bottom half, dividing that in half will get you to the top of the knees usually. You see that working pretty well. And then the shoulders are about halfway here. Then from that construct, which will give you a pretty good idea of where everything fits, we go again with big shapes. So the big angles that are defining this pose. And at every step, you try to place these things in the best way possible. most accurate way that you can, so that as you're adding more information and layering things on top, you're building your drawing gradually. You're not making any big mistakes that will bite you later on. Big shapes, medium shapes over here. And then for this project or this process here, the end is a figure block-in, or you can say a notan stage of a figure. And this is something that our students practice every day, or at least 2 times, and ideally 3 to 4 times a week in the evening sessions. We call them pencil drawings, which is not a good term. We should call them short poses or pencil block-ins or figure block-ins. What did I call it here? Pencil block-in. Yeah, I adopted to the school language, but I think it's better to call them figure notan block-in, because that's what it is. We have the shadow shapes toned in, so that makes it a notan. It's a figure and it's a block-in. It's not a finished drawing. It's that foundation that when you're arriving here and you're having everything in good shape, you can finish that drawing. It's just a question of time. A long pose, on the other hand, is when we take it from the block-in all the way to fully rendered. The process here is slightly different. Still placement here with shoulders, nipples, knees, and top, bottom, left, right. Then big shapes, notan. Then we make a value study to figure out how much darker the hair is than the figure in shadow, for example. We apply the value groups from the value study on the drawing, and then rendering, big forms, medium forms, small forms. I compressed the rendering here into one stage, because if I add more stages, this whole thing becomes too wide and every image becomes tiny. So I did the best I could here. And I hope by now you've seen the process so many times that when I say rendering, you already think big forms, medium forms, small forms. And this was done digitally as well in Photoshop. So the process is the same for doing a digital long pose in our program and for doing a pencil long pose. And down here, also a step outside of what we're talking about with drawing. This is now painting a long pose digitally. You can do the same process in oil still. And instead of a line-based approach, I use a mass-based approach. So roughly going directly, again, condensing all the previous steps, going directly to something like a notan stage without doing a separate placement, big shapes. I go straight for notan, then straight for big general colors, big forms, medium forms, and then final, well, here I separated, okay, small forms and finishing. So final touches on texture, materials. And this was pretty fast, I think 1 day or 2, probably 2 to 4 hours. So it's not as refined as some of the others, but it's a very effective process. And I hope you can see how all the previous projects feed into the artist being able to have a condensed process where everything is still happening, but it's happening at the same time. All right. This is the only thing I will skip. And let's go here. What is left is good habits, but I want to do questions and answers before and then close out with the good habits. So right now, if you have written down any questions for yourself, please put them in the chat and I'll see what I can catch. And we'll spend a few minutes on questions and then wrap it up. Okay, there are a few questions by Guillermo. How do you help beginner students who feel overwhelmed by the complexity of this? I feel that showing those Loomis diagrams to them presents a lot of complexity to the students. Yeah, that's one of the main challenges, right, with all of this. But I would look for ways in which you can reframe the complexity not as something that creates anxiety, which is where I've spent a lot of my time also. There's so much to learn. There's like, you'll never get there. But now I see that as a good thing. It means there's so much more to explore. It helps me to get up in the morning and be excited about what I can learn today, instead of being depressed about not being able to learn everything. We can never learn everything, but we can each day find or make decisions about which interests we want to follow, what we can discover in the artwork that we're working on at the moment. And I would love to do more work on that. And I think the mental part is huge. The whole, like, comparing ourselves to other people, to our peers or people on Instagram or other places, people in art history, comparing yourself to Rembrandt and Bouguereau and Velázquez can be great, can be amazing, but it can also be debilitating. And I know that there are ways in which to think about these things that create inspiration and motivation instead of depression. I don't have a good way of talking about it and of creating that change in someone, but I'm really interested, really curious about that. How do you deal with frustration and difference of skill level during your student days and nowadays? Right, same thing. I didn't read that question before. Same thing. It's so important. I've become a lot more playful, and I call on my curiosity. I know I'm a curious person. I cultivate my curiosity when I go for walks, for example, as a way to not work, which is difficult for me often. I will go for walks and I'll try to find streets where I haven't been before. And I'm never depressed about not being able to walk all the streets. I mean, it's just not possible. But I'm very curious as I'm walking the streets, and I'm walking on a street that I have been on already, and then I notice, oh, I've never taken a right turn up there. So let's go right. I have no idea where I'll end up, but let's go right and see what I find. And I sometimes walk for 4 hours, 5 hours, and I've ended up exploring so many parts of Barcelona, and I guess other places where I've been also. And it's, instead of depression, it's bringing out my curiosity and my presence, like being really here now with your drawing, with your feelings, even with your frustration. Like, feel it now instead of pushing it away and distracting yourself. And then look for your curiosity. And I wish I could say it in a better way, a more useful way. And I will work on that. How many quick drawings do you do each day to keep your daily quota? I don't have a daily quota. I have a sketchbook. For many years, I have beat myself up. I've been very aggressive towards myself. And I think I've killed my love for drawing. And I'm finding my way back now to like grow the love again, so that when I draw, it's not, oh, I have to draw because I should draw because I have to. It's like, let's see what happens today. And something that's helped me is to actually make a bad drawing on purpose, make a mess on purpose, be a little bit careless. And I think that applies to many situations in life. The less you care, the better the outcome is oftentimes. In a negotiation, for example, the person who cares less about the outcome has a huge advantage. I know it's a strange comparison maybe, But if you're a little bit less precious about your drawing, you might enjoy it a lot more. And about a quota, I don't know, it's different for every person in their stage. It was very, very helpful to be in a school where 6 hours a day there was school, so you draw. Important elements for lighting. What kind of paper is used for the final drawing? Well, lighting is a whole separate topic that I'm very passionate about as well. And I'll touch on it at the end here with the habits, but I won't go into it deeper today. The kind of paper is called Umbria. I'll type it into the chat. Umbria, Roma, and Arches are the most commonly used papers for charcoal drawing. But there too, like, it's really good to try things out. Try different papers so you develop sensitivity and control, familiarity with different types of papers. Thickness, tooth, cold press, hot press. There's so many adventures to be had on different surfaces. And an eraser. If I want to do digital imaginary illustrations and characters, how much of this traditional methods do you think applies to an artist with this end goal? How do you recommend they study and specialize to progress efficiently? For example, it probably isn't necessary to draw 3 months hyperrealistic drawing for this artist. If you want to do digital imaginary illustrations, it depends a bit on the style. Like, the more realistic you want your style to be, the more you need to have pushed your range of realism. And that does take time. Maybe it doesn't take 3 months on one single drawing, but you do need to go beyond what you're capable of doing at the beginning. And it's easiest to do that with a teacher. That can be in person or online. But there is I can't give you a number of how much is too much or not enough. You'll find it. When you feel limited, it means you should do a bit more. Posture. Do I get back pain? Not really. Some things I changed is that I got a standing desk at home, and I did a very DIY solution where I put 2 standard cheap IKEA tables on top of each other. Actually, it's 1 IKEA table and then some drawers from some other furniture and a box and another table top from another table. And I just put books and things until it has the level I like. I spend a lot of time on the floor as well, rolling around, stretching throughout the day. Maybe 4-6 times. I'll take 5 minutes, 10 minutes and just stretch, roll around and move or walk on all fours on the floor just to use my body. I do a lot of computer work, and yeah, I think it's important. Favorite artist and whose brain would you like to pick? Too many. Yeah, I can't answer. My brain just fills up and I can't see anything when I think about an answer to that question. Important elements to lighting a cast. Right, that is a very important question. I think we also don't have time. I think I misread your question before. Like, elements to lighting for a cast. The most important thing is that you want 1 light source. And it looks like that's all the questions. Subtle tone gradations, thin lines. Evgeny, I'll come back to Cipriano in a second. Evgeny, how to get subtle tones and thin lines is to develop sensitivity with how you apply tone. You can train that in pencil. Use a 2B pencil on paper and just go very, very lightly, and then go a bit darker, and go a bit darker. That value gradient is a really good exercise to develop that control. It's just your ability to control. And fine lines is the sharp point, to have a really, really sharp point. So Cipriano, about lighting casts, let me go back to sharing my screen. Here. And we'll wrap up in about 5 minutes, I think. What you see here, this box that the cast is in, there's some cardboard on the top as well. That box is to make it so that no other light is polluting this setup. So there's one light source, and that's really important. As soon as you have 2 or more light sources, it gets very confusing, very complex, and actually a bit ugly. It's much more beautiful to have one clear light source for things like this. Because your brain will understand the form more easily. If you can find something to soften your light a bit, it will also be more aesthetically pleasing. You can use a mesh to shine your light through the mesh, or transparent paper, or have a light fixture that creates a softer light. If you look up softbox, this is used in photography to create soft lighting. That can be something you can use as well. I hope that helps at least a little bit. So let's wrap it up by talking about good habits. For proportions, it is super helpful to step back often. So get physical distance from your artwork, because that allows you to see everything on a smaller scale, and you will see proportional mistakes much more easily. If you're always with your nose against your work, you will not see your mistakes. So step back. Then flip your work actually by turning it upside down or using a mirror. If you look at your work mirrored, you will also see mistakes that you have become so used to that you no longer notice them. Squinting is very helpful. So looking through your half-closed eyes, it will also simplify the values, so you can see the shadows as shadows and the lights as lights. Mostly for values, I think. Taking a photograph, that's related to seeing the big picture by stepping back. Often you might have noticed when you take a photograph to share your work with someone or on social media, when you look at it on the screen of your phone or of your camera, the moment before sharing it is when you notice, oh wow, there's a big thing I need to fix. So you can do that on purpose. Just take a picture for checking the image. And taking a break is also in a sense of your mind is getting used to the mistakes as you work. So if you work for too long, you will make mistakes more permanent. Whereas if you take a break and you come back, when you come back, you'll probably see the mistake and fix it. Same thing as stepping back or taking a picture. It's ways to not be so close to your work. And then for light and shadow, good habits in academic drawing are to always separate the light and the shadow, finding the terminator or the shadow line, and not grouping the halftones with the shadow, but separating what is really light and what is actually shadow. Finding the light direction that's related to that. If you have a clear light direction, you understand it, your shading will be much more consistent. Using all the modeling factors, that's something that also we don't have time to talk about today, but it is different light effects. I talk about it in my light guide and in the shading course. And taking breaks, same as before. And referencing my courses, I should mention on my website there are at the moment 3 or 3.5 courses. There's the shading course, which is my big course on realism and light and shadow, where we go very deep into creating the illusion of light, the illusion of space and depth and realism that I pull out, or I create in these cast drawings. I go over the principles of what creates that form, how light works, so that you can use it when you work from observation, but also from imagination. The light guide is a mini version of the shading course, 1 hour video, and a PDF summary as well. The accuracy guide is also a 1 hour video course on getting proportions accurate, which is the biggest time eater in this type of drawing. If you had the ability to put every line in the right place, your process in the drawing would be so straight and so efficient. But what we do, most of us, is we're not quite sure about where things go. So we add things, we have to erase and correct and erase and correct, and we get make loops, and it takes so much time to get to that strong foundation to then apply the shading. But there are a few mental techniques for how to see and how to find proportional mistakes and how to be accurate. So that's what I talk about in that course. And then if you scroll down there, there's the how to draw what you see, which is basically the stages of my observational drawing, which is this here. So you can go through that. And I speak it, I read it, and you can also scroll through each stage at your own speed. And every Monday at the moment I'm streaming like this on YouTube. And it's called Draw with Dorian. The idea is that you can follow along and draw with me and learn things and have fun. So that's every Monday. And then July 11th, the summer term of the shading course is starting. And I'm changing something there. At the moment, the course is open anytime and people come and leave as they like. But I think it's more beneficial for the whole group to go through the course at the same time. So on July 11th, whoever is signed up for the course, we will start with Module 1. And on Wednesdays, I do a feedback session every Wednesday for everyone in the course, and I give feedback on the assignments that are there. And I'll give assignments on Module 1 for the first week. Then second week, we all go on into Module 2, and I give feedback on that. If you fall behind, don't worry, you can still post things and I'll take a look, but the idea is that we all together create this energy and movement to go through the course and complete it together. You can find out more about that at theshadingcourse.com, which Andres said that site is down, which would be a pity. Let's see if it's back up. Okay, it's back up. Good. So you can go to that. There's a trailer. Yeah, I think you can find out everything about the shading course on that website. That's my flagship course that I've put the last 2 years into. And I hope it's useful. And with that, we have done a lot. We have done 288 slides. And I hope you've enjoyed it. And I hope you learned some useful things that you can take with you in your drawing journey. And thank you for filling out the survey, sharing your thoughts there. I really appreciate it. And this class was made specifically for those of you that shared your opinion there. So thank you for coming and happy drawing. And I'll see you soon. Take care.